911, what's your emergency?
The following content is graphic, emotional, includes dark humor that may not be suitable for all listeners. Discretion is advised. These stories are based on real-life EMS, military, and healthcare experiences. Calls are real, providers are real, names and details have been changed to protect privacy. They may be disturbing to some and are definitely inappropriate for HR department. Any medical or mental health discussion is personal experience, not protocol. Use your damn brain. Follow your local guidelines, and when in doubt, call med control. If you're struggling, don't do it alone. Talk to someone, a coworker, a friend, a therapist, or hell, reach out to me. I'll answer. Need help right now? Text or call 988 or visit 988lifeline.org.
When it doesn't want to work. All right. So you were listening to Dispatch Dysfunctional. Today's guest is Miss Candice. She came up as an ER nurse from a level 1 trauma center. Now she works as a family nurse practitioner in a community health center. So before the credentials, the initials, the whole acronyms behind our names, the trauma centers, the clinical lives, and the professional stuff, Miss Candice, who are you really outside the job, and why is this conversation worth having today?
So, outside of the job, I am a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a friend. That's who I am at my core. I am a woman of my family first and foremost. And so that informs how I work because this job, any job, is really to enable me to support myself, support my family, be a meaningful member in my community. And so my job can't interfere with that because the people who I live with, the people who I love, the people who are in my personal life are the primary people for me.
That's awesome. And why was this conversation worth having today?
So we're talking about burnout and, you know, there's life burnout, there's career burnout. For a lot of us, our career figures extremely prominently in our lives. And that affects how we go home. That affects how we show up in our families and in our communities. So, you know, I've seen people get divorced. I've seen people in healthcare become estranged from their adult children. Their children have a grudge against them because they were not fully able to parent effectively because of all the mayhem at work or the baggage and the trauma that they're carrying from work. I've seen people miss their window for having children, miss their window for partnering up. So this conversation is worth having because the work that we do is super important. The work that we do is something that our community needs. We're not gambling away people's pensions like the people in whose hands our pensions are. We're doing valuable, meaningful work, but it doesn't have to happen at the cost of having a fulfilling and satisfying personal life with relationships that are where there's tranquility and solace in those relationships.
Very true. And I think you're right. I think a lot of our job eats into our personal lives. And sometimes, we always hear the keep work life separate from personal life. That's not always the case in our fields, in my opinion. Um, we bring a lot of it home with us and we try to keep it separate. It just doesn't work that way. So one thing that jumped off the page for me that you wrote on your intake is the same selflessness that makes people right for this work is exactly what the system uses against them. That one hits hard to every medic, nurse, dispatcher, firefighter, cop, first responder, caregiver, anyone I know really listening, um, because that's what it feels like is we're the selfless ones, and if we start saying we have a problem, we could possibly end up losing our jobs, which goes back to what you were saying with the burnout. Let me just start here, I guess. So when did you realize burnout was not proof that you were weak, but proof that the math was never going to work in the end?
I made that realization when I got sick. I had internalized the throw yourself in front of everything, be the first to volunteer, be the one who never says no. I had internalized that from my days in the hospital, from my days in the emergency department. And that ethic is, it's kind of like a badge of honor. It's a sign of valor, right? Um, but I've also had coworkers who drank themselves to death. I have coworkers who have died by suicide. I have coworkers who um diverted, dilauded, and came to work intoxicated. So, on the one hand, we will give a standing ovation for the person who like leaves it all behind on the shift, but when they're going home to a home life that's been wrecked, or personal health, mental health that's been completely destroyed because of the demands of the job. Who's there for them in that case? Like the organization is not. And it's unrealistic to expect the community to come and step into that gap. So when I got sick, right? Uh, I and by the way, I've had multiple cycles of burnout. Like it's
Oh, I'm
not
sure.
like something that just happens once and then you recover and then you're fine the rest of your career. Like it happens a lot, especially like it, the work that we do, whether you're pre-hospital or in the hospital or in community health, like that work, it there's a proneness to burnout for the people who are in that kind of work, right? So here I am, my most recent bout of burnout. I'm working in the community health center. I have a scheduled vacation. I'm going to Peru. I'm going to Machu Picchu. I'm going to the Amazon. I can't wait. Okay. it's 8 days. And I worked on Friday, which was the day that I was leaving, because my plan was to sleep on the plane, land in Lima, be ready to go. Right? So I would have gotten like a full night's sleep from New York to Lima, right? But that whole week I was feeling sick. And I figured, you know what? It's because I'm grinding. I'm signing my charts same day. Responding to my medication refill requests like as they're coming in, because I'm going to be gone for a week. My laptop's going to be in New York. I'm not signing into Epic when I get to Peru, and I don't want to leave a mess for my coworkers, and I also don't want to leave my patients feeling like I completely abandoned them to go live my best life, right? So grinding all week, ignoring my body. I'm feeling tired. The moment I get home, I knock out. Like I don't even feel like eating because I'm so tired, Yeah. And I could eat. I could eat. Um, so this is happening. I'm ignoring it. And then the day that I'm supposed to leave, I actually feel chills. I feel joint pain. I feel loss of appetite. And I'm still grinding. I'm still getting through my day because I got like my luggage is packed. It's by the door. I'm ready to go once I leave work, head to the airport and get on my plane. And then there was a point in the day where I'm like, I think I have an infection. Like, I need to go get myself some antibiotics. So, my colleague who I'm flying with, also at work, grinding alongside me, she writes me a prescription. We have an in-house pharmacy. I go down, I get my antibiotic. I start taking the first one. I took an antipyretic. I took some naproxen to bring my fever down because I'm feeling chills.
Right.
Right? It's October. I'm feeling chills. So it's kind of warm in New York, right? In October. Like not like, you're not wearing a North Face, right? But I'm feeling chills in a climate controlled building. I'm sick. But again, I'm determined to go on this trip. I've worked really hard for this. I've earned this. I take my antibiotics, I take my naproxen to reduce the fever, and I'm at the airport now. I checked my luggage, again, committed to this trip. And then I start feeling a little delirious, and my colleague, my friend who I'm traveling with, she's talking to me. I have no idea what she's talking about. It's just chitter chatter, small talk, as friends do, right? And then she looks at me because she realizes that I'm not following the conversation. She says, Candace, what is wrong with you? And then she starts like pressing on like my chest, touching my face. And she's like, you are sweating and you're burning up. What's wrong with you? This is the one who wrote me the prescription earlier, by the way.
I gotcha.
And, she's like, "You're not okay." I said, "Yeah, I agree. I think I should go home, but I feel bad. Like, I don't wanna leave you on this trip by yourself." She's like, "No, go home." Because again, we're going to Machu Picchu. Like, you think there's like an academic medical center, up there in Machu Picchu? Probably not. I was gonna get on that plane and I could have died because I was so sick. Turns out I had sepsis.
Oh, wow.
I had sepsis. So when I say I could have died, like, it's
Could have died.
and I came home and I was back and forth to the doctors, and it took the entire vacation for me to not be sick anymore. And that was the turning point. That's when I realized that, all of this grinding, it's not because I was inefficient. It's not because I'm a procrastinator. It's not because I'm lazy. It's not because I don't use my time wisely. It's because the job doesn't fit in the 40-hour container that we had originally agreed upon. And all of that grinding was necessary so that I could leave to go on the vacation that I earned. And that's not my fault. And my body paid the price. And because of that culture of overwork that we pass down, not just because of what we learn in school, but in how we train people. Because if you're senior in your squad, if you're senior on your in your department or on your unit or at your clinic, you're involved in training people. And so when newbies come in, when students and residents come in, we model that overwork. We don't have to say anything. They watch what we're doing and they follow us in what we do. And so I picked it up from the people who taught me. And that culture of overwork forced me to override my body and ignore all the obvious signs in hindsight. And that was the turning point for me. It wasn't me failing as an individual. It's the system, and it's built for this exploitation, and it's built for extraction.
You're right, and I think, like you said, a lot of it is, um is trained within ourselves, um, because, heck, even when I started EMS, it was always follow the old guy, do what he says, you know, not as he does, do as he says, listen to him, and, I've got to the point to, like you were saying before with burnout, to where I wound up having a stroke due to it. So, it's funny how our bodies cope and deal with the stress that we're causing it from our own jobs. Um, we're causing our own selves damnation in the end, in my opinion. But and there's nothing really anyone's doing about it now. There's very few of us trying to even speak about it, and it's, I guess, because of how old our jobs are. Healthcare is one of the oldest jobs in the world. That's probably been that way since day one. And I think that's where one of the biggest lies, in my opinion, from burnout comes at is everyone says, not everyone suffers from burnout. To me, that's a lie. I think everyone suffers from burnout at one point in their life. And it's not just healthcare, that's everywhere. I think everyone has some kind of burnout at least once in their life. What do you think is the biggest lie about burnout?
Biggest lie about burnout is that it's a personal failure. You're burnt out because you fail to maintain boundaries. You're burnt out because you procrastinate. You're burnt out because you're not using your resources well. Um, yes, there are instances because as employees, again, whether you're fire, EMS, dispatchers, a staff nurse, an MP, whatever you are, right? We're not perfect. We're human. We have our shortcomings, we have our needs, we have our failings, we have our weaknesses. And so for burnout to be as widespread as it is, like it's hard to if we're if burnout is viewed as a personal failure, are we to believe that everybody's a failure? Or is it more likely that we were set up to fail? And when we do, again, if we're going to consider burnout a personal failing, if that's how we're going to look at it, right? If we were set up to fail and then we fail, whose fault is it? Because we didn't build this. We didn't build a system where, if you're pre hospital, right? Hospitals close and now you got to travel farther. Now you're covering a larger area. And not only does it change how you work, it's also changing what patients do. So knowing that the hospital that's 2 miles away closed and the next nearest hospital is 15 miles away, they're not going to call when they're a little bit sick. They're going to call when they're on death's door, right? And like I had to, from every now and again, I have to send patients to the hospital, right? But now if I'm calling from the clinic, and again, this is New York City, like there's hospitals everywhere, but there's also high population density, lots of traffic. So, if you're like I'll give you an example. I live 8 miles from my job. It takes me on a good day, it takes me 45 minutes to get to work, right? To drive 8 miles, it's 45 minutes. On a typical day, it takes me like 65 minutes to drive 8 miles.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
although, yeah, although there's a lot of healthcare and lots of hospitals around, it's not easy to get there,
Right.
right? So, if you've got a bunch of people calling for help for various things, the regional EMS service has to triage these things. Now, I'm in community health, and my primary care patient, is having a psychiatric break, and they're hallucinating and having paranoia because they've been off their meds. And I take care of them for like their hypertension and their diabetes, right? But here they are in an acute psychiatric crisis. But you, Chris, got a whole bunch of calls that are rule out acute coronary syndrome, rule out stroke. So my patient who's cutting up in the clinic because they've been off of their Geodon for the past 9 weeks, they become down triaged, right? They're not suicidal. They're not homicidal. This is somebody who's going to be sitting in the community health center for 5 hours pulling on our resources until EMS can finally come because all of the acute coronary syndrome and all of the rule out strokes have already been dispatched. And finally, there's a unit who's free, right? Is that your fault, Chris? Is that my fault? Absolutely not. It's not the patient's fault either. And then the nurse in the clinic who has to keep that patient calm, keep them from eloping, keep the other patients from getting pissed off at this one who's screaming and hollering in the hallway.
I bet that's
Like,
fun.
yeah, none of us are at fault for this,
Yeah,
right?
you're right.
But
I think the
the
system.
venture capitalists who closed our hospitals because they financially ran it into the ground, it's their fault. But you know what they're doing? They're chilling. They don't have to see any of this. They consolidated, they closed, they sold to the highest bidder. And they keep their hands clean of all of the mayhem. And then here we are, you got the pre-hospital people talking about, well, why is the clinic calling? Why can't they just handle it? And then the clinic people are like, why is EMS taking so long? And then the ER is like, why did they call for this guy? Like, he's not even suicidal. What are we supposed to do?
Right. And I think, like you said, it's just it's an unnecessary evil on all of us, in my opinion, too, because we all do work together in the end. But and you've worked ER, you've worked, you've been all over it, so you know exactly what I'm talking about here. There's always that. Why the hell am I here? What are we doing here? Why did you bring that guy in here? And from a pre-hospital standpoint, it sucks because we can't tell a patient, no, we can't treat you. We just don't have that ability. If that was it, from my understanding, I may be wrong. So if someone's listening, they could correct me and give me comments on this later. But in Europe, from my understanding, the medics over there have little papers that they can give out to the patients that say, "Hey, you're not in emergency need. Here's a piece of paper. Go to your nearest clinic." If we were able to triage like that here in America, I think that would help a lot of the system, and I think we would be able to have a lot more community paramedics be able to do a lot more care as that as well in that, or community nurses, or like you were saying, just community healthcare. Period. And it sucks because we are digging at each other for no reason because the patient is the one that needs what they need, you know? And as you said, that patient that you just described with a psychological break, it isn't his fault. It isn't her fault if they ran out of meds. They can't help their own mental illnesses. And it fathoms me because of the fact that we have so many people that are so down and out that they have to either choose their meds or food. That's another issue I see, um, working on the streets, and a lot of the hospital street teams do a tremendous job at that now. 10 years ago, that wasn't a thing, and we've seen a lot more of it. So we are fixing a bunch of our issues, and I think that helps a lot of the burnout in our own situations as well. But it feels to me like we abandon each other when we try to stab one another that way in the end.
Absolutely. I mean, fundamentally, every single one of us, even those of us who work in healthcare, we will be patients. I was a patient multiple times over. You having had your stroke were a patient. You probably had to call EMS, or it happened at work and somebody had to cart you to hopefully a certified stroke center, not like some freestanding ER that has access to a neurologist through telehealth, because that's a thing too,
Oh gosh,
right?
that would have
Uh,
sucked.
yeah, yeah, but I don't know if this affects your region, but, like, we have emergency departments, hospitals that don't have a neurologist,
Wow.
or don't have a neurologist 24 hours a day. So if somebody's coming in, rule out CVA, you know, they will wheel a little screen in and position it at the end of the gurney, and the neurologist will be through the screen saying, "Okay, let me see you smile. Okay, raise your eyebrows. All right, put your hands up like this." Yes, that is a thing. And so, again, it's not your fault, right? It's not, and it's very likely that the pre-hospital people, like in New York City, you don't get to choose where you go. Like you, you pick up a patient and you drop them off based on where you pick them up. So
Oh, that's
there's no
not
choice in the matter, right? So, like, if they are in the radius of the place that doesn't have the neurologist, you end up where you end up.
wow.
Yeah, and that's just how it is, because the resources are so finite and because it's so hard to travel through the city. Right? And so the situation that you describe in Europe, I also don't have first knowledge of that being, how things are done. But one important thing to notice about the difference between healthcare in Europe and healthcare in the United States is that the people in Europe have, like, nationalized healthcare.
Right.
Right? Like, everybody's insured. Like, I don't know if it's citizenship based or residency based or what, but we don't have that here. We have a large population of people who are uninsured and undoctored. Like, how many of your patients, like, what percentage of your pre-hospital patients have a PCP that they can go to? Because many people simply don't have that. And so if you, as a pre-hospital provider, said, okay, this is not this ER visit, this EMS transportation is clinically unjustified. Go to your PCP tomorrow morning. Our system doesn't support that. So because you say go to your PCP to somebody who doesn't have a PCP, where are they going to go? And even somebody who does have a PCP, like I have a primary, but she has limited walk-in availability. So if I got sick today and I tried to see her tomorrow, I might not be able to see her until what's today? Today's June 8th. I might not be able to see her until June 17th because that's how her schedule is. And maybe I could see one of her colleagues, which I'll take it if I need it. But, go see your PCP isn't real advice for many people. And a lot of times, people are discharged from the ER with advice to go see their PCP, but, many people just don't have it. Or many people are in employment situations where, you know, their work hours are the same hours as my work hours in the clinic. And if they don't go to work, they can't put food on the table. They can't keep their lights on. You know, a person with children, that person blows through their sick days in the early part of the school year. Who's got the flu? Who needs to get vaccines? Who's got a toothache or a dentist appointment of their children? So when it comes to them as parents being sick, or if they've got aging parents who they got to take to the cardiologist and who they got to take to the geriatrician, they can't even use their sick days on their own selves. So the whole advice, go see your PCP. With what time? How am I going to pay my bills if I have to take off half a morning or a whole day to manage my own medical needs? We just don't have that kind of system.
Very true, and it kind of falls back on that. This kind of piggybacks off that in the end as well. Um, we always hear about the nurses who go to prison, the medics who lose their license, and the person who's always close to the incidents. But we rarely ask ourselves, why did it happen? Was it they were tired? Was it they were just a unit short, like you're saying? Was it the system built that way, pretty much like we just described? Or, who's made these decisions? Why does accountability have to stop with the worker, in your opinion, as well on this? And even on that side of things, like you said, we don't all get to call out sick because we have sick days that we've used because we have families, and then the accountability falls back on us because we're burned out. We're so tired that we just can't do it. Why is it that we're all accountable as the worker in the end, do you think?
Because it's the easy answer.
I like it.
Um, it's the easy, I mean, it's the easy answer. It's gratifying to see somebody, like that whole expression, oh, well, I want to see some heads roll, you know? And so the person who's standing there, the person who's at the scene of the crime, so to speak, is the head that's going to roll, not their boss who built their schedule, not the legislator who, you know, who somebody lobbied to allow the sale of this small hospital that serves this region to be sold to a hedge fund or venture capital, right? And then venture capital is going to do what venture capital is going to do. They're going to liquidate that hospital, and then there's gonna be this song and a dance about why it has to close. And the nurses and the kitchen staff and the medical assistants and the EMS, they're gonna protest and they're gonna show up at town hall meetings when the decision's already been made. The place is closing. They're turning it into condos. It's not gonna be a hospital anymore. And that decision was made by the people who have a financial incentive in liquidating and extracting as much from the community as possible. And so when the unit is short and when, the fish hits the shan, so to speak, and, somebody dies and the nurse or the EMT or the officer who's standing beside that person, they're going to be, oh, you made this mistake. You made this mistake. You failed to do this. You failed to do that. And of course, that failure very well might be true, because it only sticks if it's true, right? But what about all the other failures that had an impact? You're trying to say that, The fact that I took the unsafe assignment and did the best I could do with a crappy assignment and almost no resources or support or safeguards in place, that I'm at fault for this. And you're going to pin it on me, and you're going to drag me out in front of the board of nursing. You're going to drag me out in front of the state court for the civil suit, right? Like, it's the easy answer. It's not the answer that says, okay, let's keep this hospital locally controlled. It's not the answer that says, this politician has been bought by that lobbyist and we can't believe a word that he or she says, and we need to vote that fool out because they don't work for us. They work for who funds them. That's the hard thing. That's the invisible thing. And it doesn't give you that satisfying, okay, well, at least that person got fired. At least that person, is going to lose their license. They'll never be able to do this. They'll never be able to hurt another patient again. You don't get that satisfaction when you vote out the donkey who sold out their community, for some campaign ads.
Right. And that's the biggest thing, and that causes so much of the burnout too, about everything we just talked about. But I think that's one of the biggest things too is everything is about money. It's not about the patients. It's not about the care. I don't care how many lies people want to tell us. It's not. It's about the money.
Absolutely.
And I guess I got one last question real quick before we wrap this up. So picture the person listening alone at 2 a.m. Maybe they're stuck in the truck after a bad call. Maybe they're sitting in a car before going inside because they don't want their family to see their face yet. Maybe they're a nurse after shift, a dispatcher driving home in silence, a firefighter staring at the ceiling, a medic who is functioning but fading. They know the job is hurting them. They also still care. What do they need to hear from you today?
Remember why you did this. None of us came into this work with dreams of becoming rich. None of us came into this work thinking that we were going to be the boss, and that, like, we all came into this because we love our communities. We feel we're motivated by the virtue of what we are capable of doing, right? And so when you can't go in to face your family because you're crying about the patient that you lost, or the person who, the person who you interacted with, who, their life is changing irreparably after whatever it is that happened to them today, right? Remember why you're doing this. Because the bloodsuckers and the leeches that make it so hard for us to do our work, that make it so hard for us to serve our community, they'll never have the dignity or the honor of really being useful to the people around you, of really having an impact. And if you can remember why you did this, you can maybe pull yourself together long enough to continue to do the right thing, to do the good thing that people are going to remember you by. So always remind yourself of your intention.
Yes, ma'am. So before I let you go, if people want to follow your work, connect with you, or find out what you're building, where should they go, or how can they find out more about you?
So you can find me at my website, signthechart.com. And you can also find me on YouTube, where I share useful tips for strategic job selection, how to function in these clinical workplaces, and how to master your workflow on my YouTube channel at signthechart.com.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Candice. I loved having you. Let me go ahead and stop.
If you think it's too heavy to say it anyway. It beats a eulogy. You don't have to apologize for surviving however you can. You're not the reason things are heavy. You're the reason they're still moving. Need support right now? Reach out to me. Reach out to somebody. Text or call 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. You're not alone. Not in this job. Not in this fight. Want to share your story or connect? Visit critical-run.com or message the Facebook page, Dispatched and Dysfunctional. We're building this for you, for them, for all of us.